we start getting to Christian mythology, and some of these apologists, I think, would admit with me, not New Testament, my friends. Don't run away yet, please. Please stay here. I'm here with you. We're holding hands. Everything's fine. I'm not touching your New Testament. It's okay. We're good. I'm talking Christian mythology. I'm talking about the church's history of making stuff up, fanciful narratives and stories, embellishing saints, etc., which the Protestant, if you're a Protestant, you should be high-fiving me right now, right? Because this is exactly what Martin Luther and John Calvin and all of them did. They were like, cut the crap out, quit selling indulgences. We need to get back to the true faith. And they start debunking all the miracle claims, and they show. But anyway, Christian mythology is the body of myths associated with Christianity. The term encompasses a broad variety of legends and narratives, especially those considered sacred narratives. Mythological themes and elements occur throughout Christian literature, including recurring myths such as ascending a mountain, the Axis Mundi, myths of combat, descent into the underworld, accounts of a dying and rising god, a flood myth, stories about the founding of a tribe or city, and myths about great heroes or saints of the past, paradises, and self-sacrifice. Various authors have also used it to refer to other mythological and allegorical elements found in the Bible, such as the story of Leviathan. I'm not going to read all of this. I do want to just say one thing about this. Christians were making great narratives to tell their own little stories throughout history. Right? Throughout history. This should be a no-brainer. Christian apologists, high five. Protestants, you're with me, high five. Can you hear that? That's right. We're high-fiving. Everything's cool. Nobody's afraid. Nobody's worried. Nobody's got anything to argue with me about, at least if you're a Christian apologist Protestant. Maybe if you're a Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or something else, maybe you're going to say, I take issue with this. Some of this stuff may not be that case. Some of you might be like, Derek, we're cool with that. We like the legend and the myth. We don't think it literally happened. These are lessons. They're meant to be read as myth and legend, and they're teaching us valuable lessons about life and what it was like for them. And there's so much we can glean from this information. I agree with you. Awesome. We're on the same page. Now, I want to take a little bit closer step toward first century, but not quite necessarily. And I just want to point out how often pseudepigrapha, non-canonical material was written, and how often this non-canonical material was not literally historiography or literal truth in what actually happened, but how much it has in common with canonical material. And several scholars, you can go through the span of academics that have investigated pseudepigrapha. What were they doing with this writing? It depends. But oftentimes they were embellishing narratives, inventing stories about Jesus or about Paul or about Peter, the Acts of Peter, the Acts of Paul, the Acts of John, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of this, the Gospel of that, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Judas. Well, they're inventing fiction where there's some verisimilitude. It has historical anchoring to the reality of context oftentimes. Sometimes they're persecuted and brought before the Caesar, and they're killed in front of the Caesar, willing to die, or they're being told that they're innocent, etc., etc. We are looking at several, literally, I would be interested to see how much pseudepigrapha anyone in these camps are saying are historical. And I'm talking about not that they have anchored realities or possible historical information in them, because I'm sure there's something there you could go, well, that was a historical place or person or thing. But are they writing histories? No. So the vast majority of this literature that is not canonical is fiction. Throughout Christian history, they're dealing with mythologies, legends, folklore, all that. Now I'm coming back to me full screen so you can see my ugly mug. I'm making a case. But I want to pause. I want to skip. Let's go back, man. I'm not interested in stopping at the first century because I got to keep you with me. You can't leave me. Do not forsake me, my friends. Because I want to deal with the pseudepigrapha of Jewish writings that predate from Enoch to Melchizedek literature. There's literally writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Dead Sea material. You have You have the Maccabees. You have all sorts of literature rooted and anchored with historical verisimilitude, but oftentimes fictionalized. It's narrative. They're not telling you what literally actually happened. There are narrative stories to convey messages, apocalyptic literature to tell you about what God's going to come back and he's going to save the day. And I'm looking at all of that literature and I'm going, they're not trying to write a literal history here. They're trying to give you some message of meaning, etc. And the list can go on. I mean, I've been doing recent interviews. Again, Richard C. Miller. You guys know Dennis McDonald. I have a fascination right now with those scholars who start with classicist. They're dealing with the broader Mediterranean world and the literature of that time, not starting in New Testament, Jewish only kind of ideas. They need to know both worlds, Jewish and Greek and Roman, in order to really get this, I think. And most of the scholars aren't trained evaluating that material. They're not examining it from both worlds. They're trying to make apologetics to say, the Jews hated the Greek material. The Jews hated it. Look at the Maccabees. You guys saw that recent interview, I'm sure. If you haven't, this is where Tim McGrew, Eric Manning, Stephen Boyce, and Jonathan McClatchy tried to kind of divorce the New Testament Greek literature from Greek wisdom, Greek antecedents, as if this Greek literature was not eating and breathing the bread of Greek and Roman Hellenistic food, to use the literature as food. That would have been the famous stories of Alexander, the Caesars, Homer, Euripides, all the above. Jesus has got to be better than these guys. I mean, if I was going to make a good business plan, pretend I was inventing Christianity, and I said, all right, starting from scratch, we need to make sure that those non-Jews are buying this. So, all right, how are we going to do this? All right, so Jesus, okay, he's got to kick Alexander's butt on his birth narrative. Let's have him face death like Socrates. How about that? You know what? He needs to die a hero's death. And, it was because the Jews rejected him that the city of Jerusalem was destroyed. So we'll make him like Hector. I mean, this seems to be what makes the most sense to me, approaching this material from a literary standpoint, not a historiography position. If you're going to make the case a historiography position, we need several early church father examples where they're making a historiological case and they're saying, hey, this is history, but they're not. And Richard Miller points out the first church father that even tries to write a history is Eusebius. And he mentions, he prays in his past, God, give me strength. I need help because I'm seeing very faint traces of anything before me. Nobody's written or took to task this before me. You've got him mentioning Papias, who talks about Judas being so wide and bloated, worms coming out of his penis and eye sockets with pus, and he's the size of a wagon and he explodes in a field and it stinks to this day. He's making stuff up.